Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Shadow of Kyoshi chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 13, which is called Spiritual Exercises. So, this is a pretty small chapter. It's mainly a setup for the next chapter when we actually get a vision with Karuk, the first part of the backstory basically. So this is just, okay, how does Kyoshi actually go about purposefully deciding to commune with the other avatars? So her and Yahatha have their kind of one-on-one like lesson here to try and meditate and connect with Karuk. A few other little things in the chapter as well, as we'll get into here. So we have the kind of reaction to what happened at the end of the last chapter of the Kyoso clan attacking their own, obviously the young merchant just wanting to sell stuff, so he sort of promotes that, like, oh, Sowan clan, come and buy my stuff. They don't like that at all because they're at odds with the Sowan clan. And Yahatha's like, it doesn't surprise me they were related. Enemies are enemies, but no one can shame you like your own family. So it's almost worse that one of their own has like gone against their kind of way of doing things. He does note then after this that it's not a good sign though. Fights don't usually break out until later in the festival once the alcohol starts flowing. I'm sure you have plenty of drunken aggression in the Earth Kingdom, but here, where you've got to avenge every stupid slight upon your name, I tell you, I don't love that part about my country. I really like that of just Nyatha here just being so jaded about just the way things are in the Fire Nation, and he's so tired of that is the way everyone in the Fire Nation does things. If someone slightly insults you, it has to be taken as an insult directly against your honor. You have to fight for it and potentially cause a war between clans. He doesn't like how that's the way it happened. In that case, you know, there's a lot of violence in the Earth Kingdom, but it's never so of such a magnitude as it is in the Fire Nation. It's a nice contrast in that there are actually so many similarities between the two nations, but then differences in very key ways, which is a nice contrast here. This is where it's pointed out that there are no Agni Kais. It's a spiritual offense to burn another person during a holiday. So that's why we've had all of these sort of rising tensions, but nothing super bad happened just yet. He points out the melon yam fields, which is sort of important for the end of the next chapter, just that it was mentioned before it's brought up again. And then he points out they're walking up to basically a specific spot where they're going to meditate. It's a place where Karuk kind of used to rest after some of his sort of spiritual pursuits. And he's like, oh, you'd put your bison there. That's where you'd kind of tie up your bison on your way up here if you had one. And Kyoshi's just like, I do have one, or have access to one, because Jimpa's bison. And Yahatha's like, why didn't you tell me? Like, we could have flown up here in a few minutes rather than hiking for an hour all the way up here. And you get this back and forth, which is quite nice. And it gives you a sense for like sort of the dynamic between Yahatha and Karuk, because Yahatha is going to point out that she and Karuk are actually much more similar than she'd like to admit. So this bickering is sort of the style that I suppose would happen with Karuk as well. So she's just kind of like, I thought hiking up here was part of the spiritual exercise. And so just those little disagreements, it's kind of fun. But anyway, Kyoshi's then like, okay, I guess it has to be Karuk, but if it doesn't work out with him, maybe you can help me communicate with Yang Chen instead. And he's just like, I don't think Yang Chen will be as much help as you think. She's like, no, she's the perfect avatar. Of course that's going to be the case. And he points out, this gets into some of the specifics of him as being, you know, a Bonte sage, basically. As far as I'm concerned, you know, that you have to go down the chain of your past lives in reverse order if you want to communicate with them. You can't talk to Yang Chen or the older avatars before you manage to connect with Karuk. And Kyoshi just treats this as like, great. So on top of everything else, Karuk's a wall keeping me from my full potential. And Yahatha just sort of snaps at this point, because she's been very dismissive of Karuk this whole time. And finally, he just sort of points out, you know, you two are exactly alike. He even notes that I would have known you were his reincarnation from the start and saved the Earth Kingdom a lot of trouble had they brought you before me. And Kyoshi's like so upset about this. She hates being compared to Kuruk, and he quickly lists out a bunch of stuff that's completely true. You both idolize Yang Chen to a fault. You're both stubborn as rocks when it comes to what you want, and neither of you have any control over your emotions. Mark my words, you're going to botch up bad someday because of your personal feelings, just like he did. And Kyoshi's really upset about this. But eventually they settle down and get to actually discussing how they're going to do things. This is the spot right here was where Kuruk would meditate and recover from his own spiritual journeys. So that's the connection of this spot. He's actually been here before, so it's a good place to do it. Then he points out, okay, there are basically 3 different methods by which you can communicate with your past lives. The first is that you will have a vision of him, which is the simplest one, but means you have the least control over it. You will just be shown a vision. You can't communicate. You have no control over what it is. It just is something that happens. So that's interesting. The second one is where's this one described? Another way is to have more of a conversation is if he took over your body and spoke to me in person. I would have to relay whatever you want to ask him. So this is the, I suppose, Roku taking over Aang's body to talk to Zhang situation. We haven't seen that one as much. It's Kyoshi talking through Aang to admit she killed Chin the Conqueror. That's what one they're referring to here. Kyoshi doesn't like this at all because, of course, she doesn't like Kuruk. So the idea of like him kind of becoming her, or her becoming him, just isn't something she wants at all. And then finally, it's the most difficult and the least likely to happen after one session of practice, is if you manage to meditate your way into the spirit world. There you could talk to him face to face. This is the level of communicating that most people associate with the Avatar's abilities. It's the most efficient and clear way to draw on the wisdom of the previous generations. But Kuruk's spirit isn't necessarily going to greet you. Going to be there to greet you, and your body is rendered physically helpless while your spirit is on the other side. And sometimes you don't remember anything you learned once you come back to the physical world. I like that. That is a callback to Escape from the Spirit World, because obviously that is canon content that he has to keep in mind while writing stuff about the past avatars, including Kyoshi and Kuruk. And the whole setup there was that we learned about each of the past avatars, but Aang was told right at the end of that journey he wouldn't remember any of that. But there have been other times where he has remembered his trips to the spirit world. So I like this, just pointing it out that as far as Nyahada is concerned, there's some element of randomness depending on the nature of the spirit world journey and meeting with the Avatar. You may not remember it. It's pretty nice to get that. So Kyoshi just points out that it doesn't seem like that great of a power as it's described to be, and it's like you have to practice it. Practice makes perfect. So it's going to be a little bit random this first time, but it can become as useful as, of course, it is to Aang, as we see. So the way he gets her to try and communicate with Kuruk in one of these ways is that he quickly activates his firebending and gets a small little flame going, holds it in front of her, and is like, look into this flame. Focus your attention on this single flame. It is one flame and it is many. It changes with every moment. No fire is ever the same fire. No avatar is ever the same person. You and the flame change with every moment, every generation. You are one flame and you are many. One in many, you are the flame. One out of many, one and the many. And so this actually begins to work. She begins sort of chanting along with him, saying this over and over again. And it says here, she was repeating after him unbidden, and crowds of herselves shouted back in response, a swearing-in ceremony where she was the leader and follower at once. And then the chapter ends with just, and then, as we move into the next chapter, which is called The Message. So straight into a vision that Kyoshi is going to get here. So without spoiling the next chapter immediately, she's going to get the first of the 3 methods. So it's a vision shown to her. So no communication with Kuruk, but she's going to learn something about him. So that's the chapter there. I actually really like it. Even the bit at the very start where it just is Nyahada's thoughts on just the way Fire Nation people are and the simmering tensions and how he's grown to hate that side of the Fire Nation culture of just them being too obsessed with honor and not letting anything go. So There's that. I love the back and forth bickering between Kyoshi and Nyahata, and his very blunt way of just kind of explaining spiritual matters. And that, I think, they sort of talk about his dress, that like when they first went to see him, he was wearing, as much as possible a sort of theatrical sort of fire sage outfit, but he's just wearing normal clothes basically when she heads off with him for this mission. So he's very practical about his spirit knowledge here, and it's just very clear. 3 ways to do it. It's kind of random. It'll take practice, and then you're actually more similar to Kuruk than you think. And this is the big thing that he's pointing out here. He's giving us the first insight into maybe Yang Chen isn't going to solve all your problems. You view her as being like the best avatar ever, but like, is that the avatar you really need to talk to about what's going on here? Where it, obviously sort of presenting more of the idea of Kuruk is actually quite like you. Both avatars who are flawed, have made mistakes already. Maybe he can offer more wisdom to you than she can, and it basically ends up being the case as we sort of learn as we go on, but it's just the reputation that she knows Kuruk to have versus the truth of the full situation. It's a complete contrast, and it's just this sort of needless resentment she has towards him because she sort of blames him to a degree for the situation that she's in, and sort of stuff that has happened that he did or did not do, and now she is reliant on him because this is the guy who has fought and defeated, more or less, Glowworm. Kuruk fought him to the point where he wasn't as big of a threat going forward, and that's the spirit she needs information on. So the person she doesn't really want to talk to is the one person who has the information she needs, and she has to accept that she needs to talk to him. So that's the big setup here. So yeah, a very solid chapter, even though it's a shorter one. But there are my thoughts on that one. Spiritual exercises. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.